the anti-democratic elements of our founding, have created a situation where we have a bank system that's extremely discriminatory towards like certain minorities in a way that's very anti-free market and extremely exclusionary and selective. And that's all just fucked up. And I think that what's cool is that Bitcoin is just like open and neutral. And
do you know what? I would actually push back. I would say it's only fucked up insofar as that they can then socialize the consequence of that decision. So if I'm a bank and I'm a private banker, and I choose to say discriminate, I don't like fucking yellow people or purple people or whatever the fuck, and I don't want to give them loans, I should be free to do so. There should be no law prohibiting me to do so. But simultaneously, for my bad decisions, I should not be able to go to the central bank and then just get bailed out. You know what I mean? So what will happen is discrimination has its own market equilibrium, is that if you're a cunt to a specific group of people or whatever dimension you want to use, you basically, A, should not get their business, and B, the person who you're just being a fuckwit to should not lower themselves to give you their business.
Yeah, I mean, in a pure free market, maybe that's the way that works. But as we've been discussing, like we haven't lived in that. Yeah. And we've lived in a world where the people who had all the economic power created political
transformed
power
it into political power. Totally. Yeah. Okay. So this is somewhere we can agree. So I would actually throw that through the lens of the sovereign individual thesis, right? It's like, it's a period in history where the returns to violence were such that you could concentrate power and use economic power to amass political power. And then basically, I mean, even through, a Marxist lens, the bourgeois emerged from, in his words, asunder the feudal system, tore it down, but in the process then turned into the same fuckwits that they apparently tried to tear down and built their own models of power. All they did was they placed a new banner on it saying democracy or for the people, every person gets a fucking vote. And, for me, like one of the biggest strange things, like, something that I can't reconcile in my head is this idea of like a representative government. Like, so for example, in a democracy, you as the person being represented have no option not to be represented. So like whether you choose not to vote or, vote in the opposite direction, you still wind up being represented by someone.
And
in your country,
in Australia, you like have to vote or you get penalized, right?
Exactly. Yeah, dude, it's fucked up. So it's like, so, I used to just go in there and just draw a penis on the thing. And, like the thing is, it's just wild. So that kind of, that you're represented irrespective of what you want turns into what I kind of call like this behavioral decay. Like, you have a choice, is you either steal or be stolen from. And then that's where it kind of creates an incentive for otherwise competent and capable people to move into politics instead of to move into some sort of productive application of their skill, which is, again, a function of where we are in the absence of economic power being the peak form of power instead of political. And again, that's what Bitcoin changes. Bitcoin obsoletes political power and makes economic power.
I think for the audience, like if we just bring it back to Bitcoin for a second, you could think about being like a Bitcoin user, right? And like, we don't live in a hyper Bitcoinized world yet. We live in the pre Bitcoin era still, basically. So the reality is that you have to think about like, well, what jurisdiction would I want to be a Bitcoin user in? And there's a little bit of a risk game here, right? Because first of all, we have the dichotomy between like, where do we want the mining infrastructure? And there's a big debate over this, right? People like me thought it was bad that like more than half the mining infrastructure was in China because it's a communist country. There's no checks and balances. They could have just done whatever they want. And we saw them do what they did. And you know what? That sucked for all those miners. Like they had to fucking leave, right? The United States could do something similar, but it's like less likely. There's like lobbyists and we have like the media and we have all these things. And it's like, it's less likely that the US government is just going to like get rid of mining. That's less likely because we're in a democratic society. So I think that's one interesting angle. The other one is that like, for now, okay, maybe you're a Bitcoin user and you don't like the tax law in America, so you want to go somewhere else. Well, you have to think carefully about where you're going. Like, are you going to go to Portugal? Okay, has favorable tax law. It's a democratic society, right? Are you going to go to El Salvador? Very interesting. Okay, so very favorable. However, you're entirely at the whim of Bukele. Now, Bukele could change his mind. Bukele could get toppled. Anything could happen to Bukele. So you're wedding like your rights and future to one person. And that's not ideal, I think. So when you're thinking about where do I want to be as a Bitcoin user, I have a feeling most of these people are going to gravitate towards democracies, maybe with the exception of like Dubai. And look, if you live in Dubai, I think you just got to know you live in a slave state. Like everything is made by essentially slaves. And the regime there, the fake elite or whatever, the aristocrats who run Dubai have an economic incentive to attract foreigners and to make it feel like it's a beautiful place and a paradise and a party and everything. So they're probably not going to fuck with you as a rich foreigner if you're in Dubai. But that system is totally fucked up under the surface. Totally fucked up. It's crazy. So, I mean, I think you have to think about as a Bitcoin user, where do you want to be, right? And I think that in the end, like democratic systems are pretty well aligned with Bitcoin users, and authoritarian ones are tricky, I guess would be my argument.